The main character was accidentally transported to one of her favorite novels, where the story tells of a villain named Gerald. He was an amorous tyrant, the god of war of the empire, and a cold-eyed duke with a businesslike appearance. Gerald informed the girl that she had been successfully accepted into service. His voice sounded imperious and unyielding. The girl could not realize that she was transported to another dimension because she had finished reading the book and did not understand what was happening now. At the same time, she was very scared at the thought that she would stay here with the villain and would definitely die. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed to be about to jump out of her chest. Now the girl had to become the tutor of the precious son of an imperial nobleman. It was a boy with an angelic face and a neat collar. He was incredibly sweet and obedient, just a real charmer. His name was Demaris. The boy said hello to his teacher, his voice sounding melodic and gentle. It made the girl feel a peacefulness right in her heart. She promised herself that she would be with this little angel all her life and never leave him. She was overwhelmed with warm feelings and a desire to protect this innocent creature. The girl realized that it is really great to abstract from the hustle and bustle of life, idle and be a sponger, as well as to receive the love of a rich man's child and enjoy the luxury of aristocratic benefits. But she in no way expected to become tied to the salvation system of a future antagonist. The thought both frightened and intrigued her at the same time. One day, a sign popped up in front of the girl saying that she needed to increase the system's success rate to 100% within 90 days, or Duke Gerald would destroy the world. The system notified the girl that her current success rate was only 15%. This news made her go cold with terror. The girl wondered if this meant that she was to help a fictional person for the sake of circumventing her own tragic fate. In the name of avoiding a bad ending, she decided that she would have to prevail and be brave. Gathering all her determination, she set about devising a plan. The protagonist devised a plan to increase the luck of the system. It consisted of gaining the trust and favor of his baby, thereby getting to a happy ending. But in the end, the tablet alerted the girl that the probability of her success was less than 5%. The father inquired from his son if again this woman was brainwashing him. The son only shrugged his shoulders, not knowing what to say to his father. Then the girl had to develop a plan to increase luck in system number 2. His point was to dodge any unwanted skirmishes and apply wisdom. The girl was sure that as long as she protected Demaris, things should definitely work out. She endeavored to stay close to the boy, keeping him safe from any possible dangers. But in the end, the probability of her success was again below 5%. Duke Gerald, frowning, asked the girl who gave her the right to expose herself to worthless risks. His voice sounded stern, but there was concern in his eyes. Then the girl had to devise a plan to increase the luck of system number 3. It occurred to her to become the Duke's wife and protect the future with love. She thought about this plan for a long time, weighing all the pros and cons. The main character came to the room of the Duke in only a nightie, because of which he had to put his jacket on the girl. Duke Gerald, looking at her carefully, said, judging from the girl's appearance, he wondered if he could believe she had ulterior motives. The protagonist, blushing, hurriedly stopped her plan. She felt terrible because she had been working out her plan to get out of here, but had by no means succeeded. Duke Gerald took the girl by the face and told her that once she got into the mansion, she would only have the right to storm it. His words sounded like a promise and a warning at the same time. Duke Gerald ordered the girl to answer what she had just seen. To make her confess sooner, he held out his sword in front of her. The blade glistened in the candlelight, making the girl even more nervous. The girl began to worry that she had moved here for another death. Duke Gerald reminded the girl that she only had one chance for the correct answer. His voice sounded cold and determined. In the end, the whole commotion started with the beloved protagonist of the novel. Her name was Anne. She was in her first year of university and loved reading books. Every free minute she spent in the library, immersing herself in new worlds and stories. Now she was very fond of one famous story called The Death of the Evil Duke Gerald. Anne could not tear herself away from the book, reading it day and night. The antagonist in this story was Gerald Stewart. He is the tyrant king of the Alvarad Empire, whom the protagonist seeks to overthrow. Practicing forbidden magic, the ruler severely punishes anyone who gets in his way. Therefore, the citizens are constantly in fear for their lives. However, when Anne looks at him, she feels an incredible sadness inside. Even though the plot does not delve much into Gerald's past, it is immediately clear that Jerry was not always a ruthless tyrant. The ruler's marriage is also recalled in passing, but when the union fell apart, those close to the royal court forced him to marry Princess Alana. This decision changed Gerald's life forever. Immediately after the marriage, Alana discovers Gerald's secret, namely that Gerald's precious son, Demaris, has powers that were considered a curse in their world. So the princess ruthlessly killed Demaris. Enraged by the loss of his son, Gerald executed the princess and declared war on this foolish world, his heart petrified and his soul plunged into darkness. Anne wondered if he had not lost the one he loved. Would it have ended differently? The girl realized that if someone had been on his side, perhaps the end would not have been so sad. Anne walked up the stairs and pondered that if only she could, after all this series of tragedies, have helped Gerald in some way, the deaths of many people could have been avoided. She imagined how she could have changed the course of history, comforted the grief-stricken Duke, and set him on the path of goodness. Anne decided to return to reality, realizing that this was impossible and she just needed to return this book. However, thoughts of Gerald and his tragic fate did not leave her, making her think about the power of love and forgiveness. Suddenly, Anne smelled a strange odor, and then she noticed that the whole apartment was burning. The girl began to worry that someone had stayed inside. Anne ran into the room and noticed that a boy named Kyug was standing in the middle of the fire. Anne rushed to save him, assuring the boy that she would get him out. Along the way, the girl had a thought that things looked rather strange, namely that somehow her apartment was so suddenly engulfed in fire, and on top of that, this child was just standing in the epicenter. Anne noticed that the chandelier was falling, and so she rushed to protect the child with her. At that moment, the girl was afraid that she was going to die. After that, a sign popped up that the Save the Tyrant game had been activated. The system welcomed the player to the game called Death of the Evil Duke Gerald. Now, from this point on, the girl's name was not Anne, but Brianna. Her mission was to change Duke Gerald's fate in 90 days, and the probability of her success was now 15%. The system notified the girl that the reward for her victory would be a return to the real world, and the punishment for defeat would be death. Anne was in complete shock, for she had not even asked for this, and now she must change her fate to the tyrant in exchange for her return. Anne had no such desire at all, for to read about him was one thing, but to meet him face to face was quite another. Duke Gerald told Anne that she had seen things she should not have seen, and only the dead can keep secrets. The girl didn't understand what the hell was going on at all. Then a system message popped up, providing information about the player character. In this world, Anne's name was Brianna Jones, her age was 21, and her profession was private tutor. Anne remembered that Brianna's name had only appeared once in the novel. The novel stated that Brianna Jones came to the Stewart estate to interview for a teaching position. She witnessed Demaris lose control of his magic. In a panic, she lost consciousness, and when she should have perished in the fire, Anne suddenly moved into her body at the very last moment. Anne wondered what this showed, because Gerald thought she had learned Demaris's secret, and that's why he was going to kill her. Brianna asked his lordship if he really wants to kill an innocent person. Duke Gerald told the girl that she had broken into the manor to harm a child, and therefore she deserved to die. Anne noticed that her success rate was getting lower and lower. The girl realized that she needed to buy time as soon as possible, so she tried to change the Duke's mind, telling him that he was wrong, because she was trying to protect the little gentleman, not harm him. Anne explained that she came here to interview for a teaching position, but then saw the little gentleman surrounded by flames. Duke Gerald asked Brianna if she hadn't done anything, then why Demaris had gone up in flames. Anne was confused as she saw the success rate dropping rapidly. Therefore, she began to beg the Duke to believe her. When the success rate reached 9%, a warning popped up in front of the girl's eyes that if it fell to 0%, the devastating ending would come early. Anne didn't know what to do and couldn't bear the thought that she was really going to die. Suddenly, the girl asked his lordship to wait, for she knew how to cure the little gentleman. Duke Gerald came closer to the girl, taking her by the chin, and said that he didn't know what game she was trying to play, but he would give her just one chance. The system message appeared in front of Anne's eyes again, alerting her that she should know that death in this world meant death in the real world as well. Brianna sang a lullaby to the little gentleman. The girl knew that in the novel, every time Demarest lost control of his magic, the nanny sang him that song. The girl didn't know if she was singing it right, but the words were the same, and so she hoped it would work. The Duke, watching Brianna, realized that this was the first time he had ever seen his son calm down so quickly, and so he realized that the girl's way really worked. Even though she was trying to make excuses to resolve the situation, the Duke didn't see an ounce of fear or dislike for Demarest's magic in her. The man decided that even so, he should keep an eye on her. Anne noticed that her success rate had risen to 11%, and finally Demarest was doing well too. The girl realized that this was wonderful, as suddenly Duke Gerald approached her and congratulated her on being hired, and from now on she would be his son Demarest's private tutor. Gerald reminded himself that it didn't matter what happened, because there was no problem that he couldn't handle. Suddenly, the success rate dropped to 9% again. Several days had flown by since Anne had gotten into the book. The girl realized that life here was much more peaceful than expected. Nothing more had happened with Demarest, and every day, in addition to studying with him, she did nothing but teach. The only thing that pleased the girl was that Gerald was no longer visiting. Brianna was glad, of course, not to have to face the main antagonist of the story, but her success rate had dropped to 9%, and the girl would not be able to raise the bar of assignment scores. Brianna realized that she missed hot pots, noodles, and dumplings very much. Suddenly, the young gentleman turned to his teacher, Brianna. The girl immediately assumed that the boy didn't understand something, but Demarest wanted to ask his teacher if she was leaving soon. Brianna, surprised at such a question, asked the young gentleman why he thought so. Demarest explained that all the tutors he used to tutor ended up leaving here. His voice trembled, betraying an underlying sadness and fear of losing yet another loved one. Brianna was not surprised, for the people around here despised magic, and if anyone was caught practicing sorcery, even a child, they would be in trouble. She thought about the harshness of the local laws and how hard it was for a young mage in such a hostile environment. And even the Duke's son is no exception. Plus, for his age, the boy is still poorly skilled in spells, because of which they often explode on their own, leaving behind puffs of smoke and frightened faces of others. That's why his father periodically replaces governesses to protect 10. Brianna was not at all surprised by this, but she did not understand why the little boy was so concerned. She saw in his eyes a longing for stability and affection, so she assured the boy that she would be with the young master until the end, as long as he was okay with it. A joyful smile shone on Demarest's face, as if a ray of sunshine had broken through the frowning clouds. At the same second, Duke Gerald entered the room, his footsteps echoing throughout the spacious room. So Brianna and the young lord began to study again, pretending that nothing had happened. The girl did not understand the reason for feeling as if she had been caught reading a novel during a lecture. Her cheeks flushed slightly from embarrassment. Suddenly, the Duke commanded that they had enough for today, for he could see that Brianna made an excellent teacher. The girl assured him that it was only due to Demarest's hard work, modestly downplaying her merits. The Duke gave the girl a hard stare that made her feel scared. She began to suspect that she had displeased him again, and her heart began to race. Brianna could not stand it and began to bow to the Duke, apologizing to him and swearing that she would never repeat rash mistakes. The girl did this in order to prevent the scale from collapsing below the plinth. Her voice trembled with excitement. Duke Gerald coughed and said that passers-by, seeing her rags, would think the ducal mansion was underpaying its governesses. Brianna looked over her dress and realized that it looked wrinkled and had a hole in it from the fire on the first day. She felt ashamed of her appearance. Duke Gerald asked the girl to dress up and put on a prettier outfit. Brianna embarrassedly confessed that she had no other dress than this one, and it was because she was poor. Her cheeks flushed again. Then Duke Gerald suggested Brianna to buy some clothes in the local shops, only the girl wanted to object when Duke Gerald added that it would be on his dime. His unexpected generosity surprised Brianna. Brianna immediately agreed and thanked her master. Her eyes lit up with joy and gratitude. Suddenly, the young gentleman tugged at the edge of his teacher's sleeve, reminding her that yesterday she had promised to play together after reading. Brianna had suggested then to go together right away, without thinking of the consequences. It took Brianna a second to realize that she had blurted out something wrong. The girl realized that she was completely out of her mind, asking to take Demaris for a walk right in front of Gerald. Brianna realized it was too late to retract her words, so she explained to the Duke that the new outfit could wait. Demaris asked the teacher if they were really going to have fun together. The girl realized she didn't have the heart to reject him. She saw hope and anticipation in the boy's eyes. Then Brianna turned to Duke Gerald to ask how he looked at the proposal. Eventually, after silence for some time, Duke Gerald gave his assent. His decision surprised Brianna, but in that case, he offered to go with the three of them. Brianna saw her success rate rise to 10%. She felt that perhaps she was beginning to understand this stern man. Brianna walked around town and thought about the fact that this was her first time leaving the mansion since moving to the novella. The girl didn't even know for what reason, but her success had suddenly gone up by 1, and so it felt like she was moving in the right direction inside her. Suddenly, Brianna began to feel the slanted stares on her. But then she realized that the chatter was not about her at all, but about Duke Gerald. She was relieved, but also worried for her companions. According to the book's description, Gerald's gaze was usually fixed on the humble peasants of the city. Cold eyes, glaring as if wolfish, easily strike fear into the crowds of people. Brianna furtively glanced at the Duke, trying to see those traits in him. Therefore, Brianna was not surprised why the locals were very frightened. The girl was brought out of her musings by Duke Gerald's voice, announcing that it was time for them to set foot. Duke Gerald walked arm in arm with his son Demaris, not noticing that everyone around them was discussing them, looking after them. Only Brianna kept turning around, feeling the eyes of the townspeople on her. Entering the boutique, the ladies working there also greeted the honored guests, giving them new outfits from the seasonal collection. The girl asked them to sit down and not to be shy to look at them. The atmosphere in the store was tense, but the saleswomen tried to hide their fear. The woman provided one of the dresses, saying that it was sewn by the best seamstress from the Kingdom of Wyatt, and it was the perfect choice for a young lady. Brianna explained that she was not used to such elegant things, and this dress was also too flashy. She felt awkward in the midst of such luxury. The woman then provided another outfit, saying that it had jewels from the Principality of Borgen sewn into it, and they would emphasize the beauty of the girl's eyes. Brianna was embarrassed and nearly blinded. Brianna was flanked by the lady, showing her dress after dress. The woman never stopped telling her that this or that dress or pattern was in great demand among the ladies of the noble families. The girl didn't realize what a dizzying fashion show this was. Brightly colored fabrics flashed before her eyes, and the voices of the saleswomen merged into an unintelligible hum. Duke Gerald stepped into the conversation and announced that they were going to take all of these dresses. Brianna was in complete shock when she heard this. Her eyes widened, and her heart beat faster with surprise and embarrassment. Duke Gerald had asked to take the purchases to the ducal mansion today. Brianna asked the Duke to hold the horses for at least a minute. She could feel the color flooding her cheeks as she tried to find the right words. Just as suddenly, the window above Duke Gerald's head appeared again, showing that the success rate had dropped to 9%. Brianna didn't realize what a cheesy system this was, that even a phrase like that was a step backwards. She mentally sighed, trying to focus on the current situation. Brianna tried to explain to the Duke that she was most grateful for the generosity, but these dresses were too expensive for people of her position, and it would not be particularly acceptable to educate the young heir in such garments. She tried to speak softly but confidently, hoping that the Duke would understand her point of view. Duke Gerald listened and asked the girl to then take any dress she liked. Brianna thanked him and noticed that above the Duke's head, the success rate had risen to 10 again. She felt relieved that she had managed to find a compromise. Walking out of the boutique, Brianna realized that she was pretty exhausted. She didn't even realize that going clothes shopping could affect her energy level so much, so she decided that she should be more careful. However, the girl couldn't help but agree that it had been a pretty good walk. The fresh air and brightly colored storefronts lifted her spirits a bit. Suddenly, Brianna noticed a bookstore and decided that she should visit it and buy books related to this world. Her eyes lit up with anticipation of new knowledge. The girl asked Duke Gerald to let her buy some textbooks. The man looked at the bookstore and gave his consent with a slight nod of his head. Just as suddenly, a man named Otis Shamley approached them. He is Gerald's most trusted officer. Whereupon he whispered something in his master's ear, his face expressing concern. Duke Gerald turned to Brianna and asked her to go home first, and informed her that there would be guards outside, and so he would be back soon. The girl and the young lord dutifully agreed, though Brianna couldn't help but feel a slight uneasiness. It was only when Brianna was about to suggest that the young master come in that the name Ethan suddenly flashed past her ears. And then the blonde-haired man walked beside the girl. His presence seemed to electrify the air around him. Brianna remembered that, according to the novel, the man's cloak fluttered in the breeze, and an earring decorated with a magical stone dangled from his ear. Ethan apologized for being late to Sophia. His voice was soft, but there was an undercurrent of power in it. Brianna remembered that they were the main protagonists of a story called The Death of Evil Duke Gerald. Their names were Ethan Josiah and Sophia Adler. The realization of that fact made her heart beat faster. Brianna was surprised by this coincidence and did not expect the bookstore to belong to him. The girl was also aware of the fact that he was an incredibly powerful mage who had opened his store to provide refuge for runaway wizards. This information made her even more interested in what was going on. Brianna did her best to look at the man stealthily. She hadn't expected to run into the protagonist of the story so soon. The girl realized that she could see the hero and heroine right away, for they looked very beautiful. It was as if their looks radiated an inner light. Brianna was disappointed when she realized that she couldn't hear what they were chatting about. The girl realized that if Gerald hadn't been around, she might have met them. However, it was amazing to Brianna how the little boy remained obedient even without his father, as if he were an angel. She couldn't help but admire his behavior. Suddenly, two men were talking to Brianna's ears. They were discussing the fact that people from the Stewart household had shown up here today for a walk. The men began to whisper that the Duke's estate was haunted by evil. Their voices were quiet, but full of anxiety and curiosity. One man shared that his neighbor's wife was delivering vegetables to the Duke's mansion and heard strange noises with her own ears. He also shared that it was locked in the basement, from where ferocious screams were very often heard. The other man became convinced that it was probably an ordinary animal, but the first man thought there was no other explanation. He wondered if it wasn't true, why such gossip continued. Their conversation made Brianna wonder about the secrets that might lurk behind the walls of the ducal mansion. Another man shared that he had heard how the head of the family is able to easily fight hundreds of enemies at a time. In addition, the Stewart family is known to this day to hold themselves up as defenders of the kingdom and probably made a deal with a demon or worse. Brianna hid behind a rack of books at this time, continuing to listen to the men's conversation. She held her breath, afraid of being discovered. Every word spoken by the two men made her heart beat faster. One of them told the other to stop talking nonsense, for God forbid someone should hear them, and they would be dead men at once. The man looked around nervously, as if expecting a Stewart spy to appear around every corner. It was clear to Brianna that they thought that about everyone who had anything to do with Gerald. People assume he keeps the monster as a pet and despise anyone associated with him. And he doesn't even try to refute the gossip, allowing his own part to sink into the mud just for the sake of covering up Demarest's bursts of magic. The girl wondered what it would be like to live under the constant oppression of such rumors and suspicions. She imagined how hard it must be for Gerald and his family to face the distrust and fear of others every day. Brianna admired Duke Gerald's willingness to sacrifice the honor of an entire family just to protect his son. She realized that even though he seemed indifferent, he actually loved his child with all his soul. This selflessness touched Brianna to the core, making her think about the power of parental love and the sacrifices people can make for their loved ones. What was Brianna's surprise when she heard the man say that Duke Gadgerald's wife died right after the baby was born? The man suggested that apparently the Duke had gotten rid of her. The girl couldn't listen to this anymore, and so she looked out from behind the shelving unit. She turned around and noticed that the young lord was surrounded by a magical aura, which could only indicate that his magic was out of control again. Brianna felt her heart beat faster with excitement for the boy. Brianna realized that she had completely forgotten that she had left the young lord alone in the reading corner. The girl decided that she couldn't let him lose control of his magic since there were so many people around. She imagined the chaos that could ensue if magic broke loose in this crowded place. Brianna turned to the young gentleman and asked if he needed help finding an interesting book. Then, when the boy didn't answer her, she suggested that she just leave the place. The girl decided that she needed to get the boy out of here as soon as possible, as there were too many extra eyes here. She could feel the tension building with each passing second. Brianna looked around at the nearest places and realized there was nowhere to hide. But then she remembered that, according to the novel, Ethan kept a portal to the magic lab in his shop too, just in case. That thought gave her hope of escape from the situation. The men wouldn't stop talking about how if the Duke had made a deal with the devil, his son must be a monster too. Mentally, Brianna told them to shut their mouths and stop talking. The girl was incredibly angry with them, feeling the anger boiling up inside her. One of the men shared that no one had ever seen the Duke's offspring in person, because of which they concluded that the rumors were not lying. Demaris, hearing all this talk, slowly began to lose his temper more and more. Brianna could see the boy clenching his fists, trying to contain his emotions. The boy couldn't take it anymore and screamed at the men, calling them nasty liars. The young lord's magic slowly began to spiral out of control. The air around him began to spark, and Brianna felt the hair on her arms stand up with static electricity. The flow of his energy was so strong that the racks and books around him began to fly apart. Brianna, in order to calm the young master, put her arms around him. The girl tried her best to make sure no one noticed the young master. She whispered soothing words to him, hoping it would help him pull himself together. The girl began to remember exactly where the teleportation item was located. Brianna realized that she needed to find it as soon as possible. The girl looked around the racks with her eyes as she suddenly came across a book that gave off a slight glow. Her heart beat faster with excitement and hope. As soon as they touched the book, they immediately disappeared. Sophia asked Ethan if he felt it, to which the man nodded in agreement. He would have felt such a strong surge of magic. Ethan frowned, trying to figure out what had happened. The men, who had been telling each other nasty rumors not long ago, were still in complete shock and asked the others present if they had heard the child's voice right now. Another man said that there seemed to be a child and a girl standing between the racks, and suddenly they disappeared somewhere. The people around them began to whisper, trying to figure out what had happened. At this time, Brianna and Demaris moved into the lab. The girl remembered that in the novella, Ethan had disguised the entrance to his hideout as a book, and by properly pressing the letter on the spine, the binding opened the gate. She looked around, marveling at the wonders of magic around her. Brianna was incredibly glad that they had escaped in time. The girl looked at the baby and realized that he had passed out from the energy spike. She gently laid him on the nearest couch, checking his pulse and breathing. Mentally, Brianna apologized to the young lord for not being able to stand up for him properly. She felt guilty for not being able to protect him from evil tongues and prevent this incident. Suddenly, the girl behind her heard footsteps. She turned around and saw Ethan hiding under a mask. Brianna realized how badly she had screwed up, since the entrance to this place is kept secret from the others. She felt a chill run down her back. The girl began to ponder what she should say if he asked about it. Brianna's thoughts revolved only around how to get out of this situation. Suddenly, Ethan turned to the girl and asked her to tell him how she had managed to curb such a huge flow of magic. The girl was completely shocked by this reaction. Ethan assumed that a powerful sorceress was sitting in front of him and asked her to share her secrets. Brianna tried to explain that things were not as he thought. She felt the color rush to her cheeks from embarrassment. Suddenly, the girl noticed that the young gentleman was getting worse. Ethan looked at the child and wondered what was wrong with him. Brianna thought for a second that Ethan was one of the strongest magicians in the city, and he would be able to help. The girl turned to Ethan and began to plead with him to save the boy. Her voice trembled with excitement and fear for the young lord. Brianna took the mage's hand, which made him embarrassed, but after coughing, he still agreed to help. The mage touched the child's forehead, which made Demaris feel much better. The girl, watching the powerful mage, realized that he was indeed a healer. But she also realized that this was quite expected of the protagonist, whom the novel described as valiant and kind. Brianna exhaled with relief and thanked Ethan for his help. The powerful mage suggested that her little friend had fallen off due to the depletion of his magic, and it turns out it belonged to him. The girl gave an affirmative answer, feeling the tension slowly let go of her. Brianna wondered why he was suddenly asking, but in Ethan's imagination she was the source of this magic, but in reality it turned out to be Demaris. Brianna began to apologize to Ethan for her unreasonable hopes, but the girl didn't understand what feelings she was even apologizing for. Her heart beat faster as she looked into his deep, penetrating eyes, trying to find the right words. Ethan wondered, however, if the girl couldn't do magic, how did she sneak in here? Brianna realized that Ethan kept asking questions, but she didn't know what words to choose. She could feel the cold sweat beating on her forehead as she frantically searched for a plausible explanation. Ethan assumed that if she didn't use strong magic to remove the spell, then she simply knew where the gate was. The man asked the girl to come clean. Brianna realized that she wanted to, but then she definitely wouldn't be believed. She felt her heart clench with fear and indecision. The girl imagined telling what she had read about everything in the book, where she is in fact a character in a fictional story, where her nemesis is Gerald. Brianna realized that he would definitely think she was insane and kill her. The thought made her shudder, and she tried to push that horrifying scenario away. Brianna cautiously asked the powerful mage if she'd sound credible if she said she'd found the move by accident. Ethan warned Brianna that lying to the mage was a huge mistake. His voice sounded serious and a little threatening, which made the girl even more nervous. The girl realized that it was not a good idea to be humorless in front of him, especially after his help to Demaris. The man realized that the girl wasn't even able to think of ways and twisted around, still trying to make excuses for herself. He watched her carefully, trying to figure out what she was hiding. Ethan assumed she was probably protecting the boy. Only the man was about to say something when suddenly there came a loud order for every corner to be turned upside down. This sudden noise made Brianna flinch, and her heart beat even faster. Suddenly, a plaque with her success rate, which already had 6% on it, appeared in front of Brianna's eyes. Then, of the success scale dipping and approaching the tipping point. The girl realized that apparently Gerald was already aware that she was missing. She felt panic begin to overwhelm her and tried to take a deep breath to calm herself. Brianna alerted Ethan to the fact that surely the Duke had shown up. Therefore, he would need to give the baby to him. The mage inquired if it was his son. The girl answered nothing to that, realizing that revealing Demaris's identity would cause more problems. She bit her lip, trying to quickly think of a way to get out of this situation. Brianna realized that there was no time to ponder. She needed to gain favor now, so she gave a positive answer to the mage's question. The man was slightly surprised when he heard that. His eyebrow lifted, and he looked at the girl carefully, trying to see if she was telling the truth. Brianna turned to the noble warlock, whereupon he touched her forehead with his finger. The girl wondered what he was doing. As he did so, she felt a wave of warmth flow through her body. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant, and Brianna felt her tension subside a little. The noble mage notified the girl that she could leave this time. However, she now had a seal on her, and if she tried to tell anyone about his hideout, the irreparable would happen. Those words made Brianna feel a chill run down her spine. Brianna was slightly frightened, and this did not go unnoticed by the noble mage. He suggested that it was a bit too harsh. The girl tried to hide her fear, but her trembling hands gave away her excitement. Ethan asked the girl to take his words seriously, for he had issued a warning. Brianna laughed a little, as he wasn't the least bit scary. Her laughter, though a little nervous, diffused the tense atmosphere a little. Brianna assured that she understood, and so she swore to take this secret with her to her grave. The girl thought that even if he hadn't put a spell on her, there was no way she would have blabbed. However, he was very bad at playing the villain. The thought made her smile despite the seriousness of the situation. Brianna started a conversation regarding the method of her teleportation here and said that she promised to share it a little later. She hoped it would be enough to satisfy his curiosity for the moment. Ethan agreed and asked Brianna to let him escort her back. Afterward, an enchantment enveloped the girl and the boy. Brianna felt the magic surround her and closed her eyes, preparing to move. At this time, Duke Gerald was incredibly angry and ordered his subordinates to interrogate everyone present in the shop. And until they answered where his son Demarest had gone, they would not leave here. His eyes burned with rage, and his fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Suddenly, one of the men alerted that he had seen a lady with a child come in here. The man assumed that she had kidnapped him. This news made Gerald tense up even more, his face contorted with anger. Duke Gerald wondered if they were really talking about Brianna. He then turned to his handmaiden named Otis and told him to send guards to find her, and the 2 witnesses he wishes to personally ask a few questions at the mansion. His voice was cold and determined to find his son. Suddenly, Brianna herself appeared and turned to the Lord to explain that the young master wasn't feeling well, so she came out of the usual door to take him away for a breather. She tried to speak calmly and confidently, even though her heart was ready to jump out of her chest. Brianna saw that the gauge above Duke's head was already at 4%, so she decided that she needed to explain the exact reason why she had done so, or he would turn her to dust with his rage. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. The girl said that she wanted to find a remote place where he could lie down, for a thing had happened as before. Duke Gerald asked Brianna if she meant it, to which the girl nodded in agreement. She prayed that he would believe her. Brianna realized that she couldn't speak directly about the mana surge, but she couldn't hold back either, so she just hinted to explain herself together. Duke Gerald turned to his underlings and told them to take everyone away. After that, the success rate over his head increased to 5%. Brianna was slightly relieved, but realized that the danger was not over yet. Duke Gerald approached the Etonian pillar and then grabbed him by the collar of his cloak. The man explained that only dead men could keep secrets. And then Brianna woke up. The girl realized that it was just a nightmare. Brianna sincerely hoped that Gerald was okay. Yesterday, after returning back to the manor, the Duke had put Demarest under the care of a doctor. The girl had expected the Duke to give her a beating, but in the end, he had silently sent her back. Brianna assumed she was too nervous to even remember dozing off. The girl realized that the Duke immediately realized after the hint that his son had lost consciousness due to a strong mana release. However, she had originally been aware of the boy's secret. Brianna wondered how to explain the situation to him. Suddenly, a knock sounded in the girl's room, after which she wondered who was there. It was the butler who asked the girl if she was awake yet. Brianna asked the butler to wait, for now she was going to open the door for him. The girl wondered why the butler had suddenly decided to stop by to see her. The butler informed the girl that the Lord wished to see her, so she should head to his study. Brianna was surprised to hear this. She realized that she apparently had no choice left. The girl knocked on the door, whereupon she was invited to enter. With trembling knees, Brianna entered the office. The girl had the impression that Gerald had been interrogating people all night, and now it was the turn of the most important witness. Duke Gerald said that he had spoken to the regulars of the bookstore, and now each had sworn to keep quiet and not to spread gossip. Brianna realized that it was not a dream. The girl asked Duke Gerald what he had done to them. The man explained that they had simply sent them home. The man assured that the citizens were perfectly fine. Brianna was so surprised by what she heard that she didn't even believe it right away. The girl wondered if they had been tortured. But the man explained that, in all likelihood, she had simply misunderstood those words. Duke Gerald turned to Mistress Brianna, which made her flinch. The girl saw that the success scale was currently frozen at 5%. The man asked Brianna if she wanted to tell him everything. Brianna realized that there didn't seem to be any point in looking for excuses, since the system warned that if the scale dropped to 0, the mission would fail, so she decided that she needed to be careful. Brianna explained what she knew about the young wizard's magical gift. Brianna explained that because of the instability of his magic, he has a very hard life, but the Duke carefully hides it so that the kid is not treated as an outcast. The girl understood that even though Demarest was forced to be on the sidelines all the time, in her opinion, sorcery was not a crime. The girl said that if Duke Gerald would allow it, she would very much like to continue teaching his son in the future. For Brianna knew that such a man would need love and protection. The Duke did not answer, which made the girl worry that she had said too much. After a couple seconds of silence, Duke Gerald told the girl to go back to her room. Brianna was surprised, for she had stepped in and had not received a single rebuke in return. The Duke, noticing the girl's reaction, wondered if she wanted to talk about anything else. Just as the girl was about to leave, the Duke asked her to wait, and then threw his cloak over her shoulders. The man asked Brianna not to forget about etiquette, because it is not proper for a lady to walk around the mansion in a nightgown. As soon as the girl crossed the threshold, she realized that she had a rather strange impression, as if the Duke's cold heart was melting a little. Brianna concluded that he was actually not as rough and cruel as described in the novel. Duke Gerald leaned his back against the wall and wondered if the girl really didn't think magic was bad. Whereupon the success scale above his head rose to 12%. Brianna sat at the table and realized that a lovely father and son meal seemed to be coming up, but somehow she had become a part of it. The girl still had the maid's voice in her ears about getting up as soon as possible, for His Grace was inviting them to dine together. Brianna thought about the fact that after their conversation then in the study, the success scale had climbed quite nicely. The girl was very pleased with herself as she had done a great job. Brianna decided to put any thoughts aside, as her first priority right now was food. However, Brianna looked at her portion and didn't understand why there were so many kitchen utensils. Even though she was hungry, she couldn't help but notice how Duke Gerald was looking at her tensely. He seemed to expect some special behavior from her at the table. After a while, the Duke's handmaiden entered and, apologizing for interrupting, explained that a document had been sent from the Imperial Palace. The handmaiden said that His Majesty wanted the Duke to take over the preparations for the Harvest Festival. The Duke's face tensed for a moment, but he quickly hid his anxiety. Brianna was greatly surprised when she remembered that that was where the tragedy unfolded. In the plot of the novel, the Emperor holds a feast every 3 years to thank the gods for favors and protection. In the novel, everything was going smoothly until a bull that went berserk ran straight into the crowd. During the commotion, Jared saves the crown princess, and she falls head over heels in love. The girl swallowed nervously, realizing the responsibility that rested on her shoulders. A few months later, according to the plot of the novel, the current ruler would use his own family as leverage and force them to marry. Unable to object to anything, Jared will have to agree. And it would later turn out that the heir to the throne is the story's biggest villain. Brianna thought for a moment, trying to remember all the plot details that could help her prevent the impending disaster. Brianna dropped the table object, then began to apologize for her clumsiness. Her cheeks flushed and her hands became even more awkward. The Duke asked the girl if she too would be participating in the festival. The girl wondered why all of a sudden this was, and if her presence could somehow affect the course of events. The Duke's handler said that the Emperor had mentioned bringing Demaris, because the boy had reached the age when he should be shown in public more often. The Duke entered the conversation and warned that he would need supervision. His voice sounded stern, but there was a flicker of warmth in his eyes as he spoke of his young ward. Brianna thought about how if she got there, she could find a way to keep Jared and the princess from getting close. Then maybe the trouble would be overtaken and she would return safely to her homeworld. The girl took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts and gathering her resolve. Brianna asked the Duke not to worry, for she had promised to take care of the young master. The girl realized that she would definitely try to steer the course of fate in a better direction. Her voice sounded confident, though inside everything clenched with excitement. 3 days later, Brianna was strolling down the alley, thinking about the fact that the festival was about to start soon, and she had absolutely no idea how to prevent the princess and the Duke from meeting, because of which the girl had incredible anxiety. She had worried too much that she hadn't even gotten much rest, which was why she woke up in the morning with a splitting headache. The wind was ruffling her hair, and the sun was caressing her skin, but even this idyllic picture couldn't calm her thoughts. The girl hoped that a walk in the fresh air would remedy the situation as she suddenly bumped into Duke Gerald. She immediately began to apologize, feeling the paint flood her face. The man shook off his suit and asked Brianna if she always stepped without looking around, to which the girl once again apologized, lowering her eyes. Brianna decided to change the subject and asked Duke Gerald what time he would be back. The girl understood that because of the preparations for the festival, the Duke would leave early in the morning and arrive only after dark. He had been doing so for a long time, and was now even curious as to why he had decided to drop by so soon. Duke Gerald asked Brianna to meet Madame Lydia, for she would be her etiquette teacher for the next couple of days. The Duke said that Demaris and Otis had relayed her concerns regarding the upcoming carnival. In that same second, Brianna felt incredibly embarrassed that her excitement was so obvious. Duke Gerald assured the girl that few people were able to hold themselves naturally at such events, but Madame Lydia's knowledge was a great exception. The man assured Brianna that under her supervision, she would improve her skills immediately. His voice sounded reassuring, and Brianna felt some of her anxiety recede. What was Brianna's surprise when she realized that Duke Gerald had done all this for her? The girl remembered that he had seemed indifferent in the study then, too, but had ended up being caring and warm. It was surprising to Brianna that his heart wasn't as cold as she had thought. The thought warmed her from the inside out, and she felt a surge of gratitude. Brianna turned to His Grace and expressed her immense gratitude, after which, the success gauge above Duke Gerald's head increased by 1%. This small progress gave the girl hope that perhaps she could influence the course of events for the better. And so the day of the Harvest Festival came. Brianna tried to come to terms with the thought that the day was near, and she needed to prevent terrible events from happening. The girl remembered that in the novel's narrative, the Duke and Princess first met on stage for a performance, and in order to prevent tragedy, it will be necessary to take action. Since the princess will fall in love with the Duke right during the incident, in reality, the only thing left to do is to get him away. Brianna took a deep breath, gathering all her resolve. She realized that the fate of not only the characters in the novel, but possibly the entire world depended on her actions. With these thoughts in mind, she headed towards the festival venue, ready to do whatever she could to change the course of history. Brianna wondered if she could turn back the course of fate. The girl was clueless as to why the success scale was going up, yet she was even glad of it. Deep down, she felt that fate was preparing something special for her, and this feeling gave her strength. The maid's voice brought her out of her thoughts and informed her that the carriage was already in place. Brianna realized that she should not fill her head with bad thoughts now. For Demaris, herself, and Duke Gerald, she had to give her best. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts and adjusting herself for the upcoming event. Demaris ran to the carriage, expecting his father to come out of there now, but the boy's face immediately showed an emotion of dejection when he saw Otis come out of there. Brianna wondered what Otis's reason for being here was. The man apologized to the young lord for not being able to come and take him to the feast. Demaris's eyes read disappointment, but he tried to keep a brave face. Otis warned Brianna that Duke Gerald was to make a speech on behalf of the imperial family today. The man asked the girl and the child not to worry, for he promised to escort them to the carnival market. This news made Brianna tense, but she tried not to show it. Brianna realized that it was then time to put the plan into action. She discreetly glanced over to Demaris, letting him know it was time to act. Demaris asked Sir Otis to wait for his father to join them. The boy's voice sounded confident despite his inner turmoil. Otis apologized to the young lord, explaining that he had much work to do. Brianna glanced at Demaris and began to mentally encourage him not to be afraid and to keep insisting. She had faith in the boy's fortitude and knew he could handle it. Demaris warned Otis that if he disobeyed this order, he would report him to his father. Otis could barely contain his laughter, but agreed nonetheless. The man also explained that he wasn't sure if Duke Gerald would agree to such a proposal, but Demaris was determined and wasn't about to back down. Brianna and Demaris were backstage. The girl praised the boy, saying that he had done a great job with the first step. She could feel her pride in the young lord growing. Brianna thought about the fact that if there are things in the world that can make a busy person drop any business and even refuse to watch a performance, it is only a native blood child. 2 days ago, the girl was reading a story to the young lord as she suddenly said that it would be nice if the lord would take a walk with them. The boy had agreed, and Brianna had offered to play along as they had agreed. Now was the moment of truth, and she hoped their plan would work. Duke Gerald Stewart himself took the stage to a round of applause. The man greeted each person present. Duke Gerald notified the people that the locusts coming from the north of the state had been completely exterminated. The man also notified the people that the foundations for new homes had already been laid, and the citizens who had lost their roof over their heads would be given the help they needed. Brianna, who was watching the Duke from backstage, thought about the fact that she had never seen him so serious. What surprised the girl even more was that he brought up mostly the welfare of the inhabitants and their problems. Otis, who was standing behind, wondered to the girl if this was really striking. After all, the sire is the kindest man of the aristocratic family, and no one cares for the people as much as he does. Duke Gerald continued his story as he suddenly cast a glance at Brianna peeking out from behind the curtains. As soon as their eyes crossed, the girl immediately skirted back, covering the curtains. Brianna was incredibly embarrassed that the Duke had caught her peeping. Otis turned to the lady and said that the speech was coming to an end, so he suggested that they slowly head towards the lounge. 10 minutes later, they were already in the recreation hall. Demaris and Otis noticed that the girl's cheeks were very red and had been for quite some time. Then, after a while, Duke Gerald entered the room. Brianna realized that it was the hour of phase number 2. Otis was whispering to the Duke about the situation, after which the man glanced displeasedly at his son and at Brianna. The girl wondered if he would be disappointed in them after such a statement and distraction from an important matter. Gerald asked the girl if Otis was lying, for he wanted to know if his son had really demanded something so unreasonable. Demaris hesitantly gave an affirmative answer and explained that he had simply never been to a feast before, so he decided to ask to have fun together. Duke Gerald said something that made Brianna think he intended to attend the play anyway. Duke Gerald told his handmaiden to enter soon, because the performances can't be missed. He must take his place there and at the subsequent events. Brianna was utterly shocked when she heard this. She decided to ask Duke Gerald if he had really changed his plans, to which the man answered in the affirmative and stroked his son's head. He suggested a walk around the fairgrounds. Brianna looked at Duke Gerald and noticed that the success scale above his head had increased to 15%. Brianna, Duke Gerald, and the young gentleman strolled through the Harvest Festival. The girl remembered that in the novel the place with the stalls had been described in vivid detail, but it turned out that the place was even better than imagined. Demaris noticed a row of toys and asked his father if he could look closer, to which Duke Gerald gave his son a positive answer. The boy began to pick out a toy, while Brianna shared with the Duke that she had never seen the young gentleman so excited. The man inquired of the girl, "Did she really teach him to talk like that?" Duke Gerald apprised the girl that his handmaiden had told him everything, so he asked Brianna to explain herself. The girl realized that Gerald had already found out everything. Therefore, she decided not to hide the truth and confessed that she said so, because there is no other way to pull Duke Gerald out for a walk. Brianna explained to the Duke that the boy understands his busyness, so he doesn't ask for anything, but she is sure that he is probably still a child. Only the girl wanted to say something as the Duke interrupted her and informed her that she had done the right thing. Brianna was incredibly surprised that the Duke truly took her act well. The girl was brought out of her musings by the voice of the young lord, who was addressing her father and Mrs. Brianna. The girl ran up to the young master and asked him what was wrong. The boy narrated that the gentleman wanted to give him a present. Brianna looked up and saw that Ethan and Sophia were here too. Duke Gerald looked at Ethan and said that he remembered his face, then asked if he was the owner of the bookstore, to which Ethan answered in the affirmative. The girl, watching the whole picture, noticed that the atmosphere was getting worse. She somehow got the impression that they were sworn enemies of each other. Duke Gerald asked Ethan what business he had with his son. Sophia entered the conversation and assured him that Mr. Ethan would like to please the young master with a gift. Duke Gerald turned to his son and inquired if he liked it. Through his embarrassment, the young master confessed that he liked it very much. So Duke Gerald ordered all the toys to be wrapped up. Brianna looked at the man and noticed that the success scale had increased by 1%. The girl didn't understand how the success scale kept going up and tried to find some logic. Duke Gerald said that if he wasn't mistaken, the toys on the table were for charity. Sophia countered in the affirmative, saying that each one was the handiwork of orphans from orphanages, and the profits from them would later be donated to orphanages. The Duke asked that some be left to the kids and the rest be sent to the Duke's mansion. The man also warned that he would give a deposit and pay full price. Brianna realized that the Duke had decided to buy up everything to help the underprivileged kids, and then assured that he would bring all the toys tomorrow morning. Sophia expressed great gratitude, saying that she was sure the little ones would be overjoyed. Duke Gerald, his son, and Brianna left the toy stall and went for a walk. Brianna bought cotton candy and asked the young gentleman if he wanted to try it, to which the boy excitedly gave a positive answer, but unfortunately his hands were busy with toys. This did not go unnoticed by Duke Gerald, so he asked his son if he wanted Mistress Brianna to feed him, to which the child gave an affirmative answer. Brianna brought a cloud of cotton candy to the boy's mouth, whereupon he took a small bite. The girl thought about the fact that Duke Gerald must have done that on purpose. The girl noticed that it was already evening. Brianna realized that walking past the shopping streets brought back memories of going to farmers' markets in her homeworld. Suddenly, Brianna shoved cotton candy right in the Duke's face, then blinked apologetically, feeling incredibly embarrassed. Brianna didn't realize why she had suddenly brought the cotton candy up, but the man didn't hesitate and just took a bite, thus surprising Brianna. Brianna looked up at the sky and noticed the beautiful fireworks. The girl wondered why she had suddenly done something so confusing. However, Brianna realized that since fireworks were currently rattling the sky, it meant that the meeting with the princess had been successfully averted. The girl turned to Duke Gerald to tell him that it was time for the young master to take a nap, so she suggested that they slowly return. Just as suddenly, there was a shout and a stomping of hoofs, telling that the coachman's horses were not obeying. Duke Gerald seized the girl and his son in an armful to keep them out of danger. Then, as the carriage passed, Duke Gerald asked the girl if everything was all right, to which Brianna gave an affirmative answer. Brianna was genuinely glad that Duke Gerald had not hurt himself. Suddenly, a red-haired girl stepped out of the carriage to see who was there who liked to pollyjack in the middle of the alley. Brianna looked out and realized it was Princess Alana Wahlberg. Then the success scale above Duke Gerald's head dropped to 10%. Brianna realized that crossing paths with Princess Alana did not bode well, and the success rate dropped by a full 10 points. The girl was brought out of her musings by a young gentleman who was addressing his teacher. The boy noticed that she looked troubled from the morning, and so was very concerned about her. Brianna apologized to the young lord, explaining that some thoughts just wouldn't let her go, and they were quite unpleasant. 3 days ago, Princess Alana approached the Duke. The woman asked him to accept her apology for the inconvenience. Duke Gerald said that the lady of her flight should not bow in such places in full view of everyone. The princess couldn't help but agree, as she suddenly added that she was going to bring a sumptuous banquet and would like Gerald to grace the rest of the guests with her presence. Princess Alana warned that she would send a man tomorrow. But Duke Gerald said that there was no need to bother, for he had too much work to do, and so it was unlikely that he would be able to attend the feast. Princess Alana said she was sincere, and added that her father would be very glad to see him. Duke Gerald decided that since it was His Majesty's wish, he dared not refuse. Brianna thought about the fact that the scale had slipped to 10% since Alana's appearance, but that was not what was stressing her now. Even though she had led Gerald away from the fateful event, she still ended up not preventing their meeting. If nothing is done at this point, then according to the original plot, the baby will definitely die. Suddenly, the negative thoughts stopped swirling in the girl's head because the young lord came over and started stroking her head. Demaris assumed that she must be thinking about something unpleasant. Demaris asked the teacher not to be sad, for he was there to support her. Brianna mentally thanked him, calling him a sweet little angel. The girl promised herself that she wouldn't let anyone hurt him. The girl remembered that in the novel he had lost control of his magic during a party thrown by the princess, so by teaching him, the trouble would probably go away. Brianna realized that there was only one person who would help here, and that was the powerful mage item. The girl stood in front of the door, questioning whether she should just walk in. Brianna remembered that the narrative seemed to describe him as kind, who had bailed out many simple peasant children with magic. However, Demaris is from the upper classes, which means he is assured of extra attention from prying eyes. Brianna realized that it was unlikely that a man as honest as Ethan would expose himself to such a risk. A mother and her child passed by and looked at Brianna as if she were crazy. The girl slapped her cheeks and told herself to pull herself together, reminding herself that all the effort was for Demaris. Brianna entered the room and immediately said hello, but it was completely empty. Suddenly, Sophia peeked out from behind a shelving unit. She immediately recognized Brianna and apologized, explaining that she was the only one in the shop today, so she was a little late. Brianna assured her that everything was fine and explained that she had come because of the Duke's son. Sophia said that she could help solve the problem. Sophia admitted that she had already known that the boy had magic when she'd barely stepped into the shop. She added that adults rarely lost control of their magic. On top of that, with the young wizard not feeling well, it wasn't hard to guess. Brianna thought about the fact that it turns out Sophia also knows about the actions. But there was no mention of such a thing in the novel. She was not the one who had discovered Mana's outburst, but a mysterious figure. Brianna decided that it was time to teach the young lord how to use his spells. The girl responded positively, and Sophia asked what exactly she needed help with. Brianna began begging Sophia and Ethan, Twilight's guide, to mentor the boy and teach him how to control bursts of energy. Sophia asked the girl if she already knew his real activities. The girl got angry, since she had asked him 1,000,000 times not to wear his stupid cape. Brianna realized that, as expected, the main character's pseudonym would eliminate any unnecessary suspicion. Brianna admitted that she wasn't sure if he'd agree to help them out, since no one wanted to mess with the Stewart family. Sophia said that they'd always tried to take care of children with such problems, and of course they wouldn't leave the Duke's son in the lurch. Brianna was incredibly happy with what she heard. However, she remembered that she had not warned Duke Gerald about her decision at all. Sophia immediately realized from the look on the girl's face that she had not discussed the matter with His Highness. Sophia warned the girl not to panic, because she herself should talk to Ethan first. Sophia warned that when she had everything sorted out, the two of them would pay them a visit. Brianna agreed, thinking that Sophia was not a lady, but a real angel. The girl entered Duke Gerald's office, mentally adjusting herself to the fact that she could do anything, and now there was nothing to pass up. The man asked the girl if she had been out for a walk recently. Brianna was slightly surprised and asked the Duke where he deduced that from. Duke Gerald revealed that his son had lost Brianna and even showed up at his office to check on her. Brianna explained that she was just trying to find a new teacher for the young master. Duke Gerald was wary when he heard that. Afterwards, he asked the girl what the reason was, since he thought she was doing quite well. Brianna explained that she meant the teacher sorcerer. At the same moment, the girl immediately covered her mouth and did not understand why those words suddenly flew off her tongue. In response, Duke Gerald looked at the girl with a creepy look. Brianna reminded the Duke of the incident at the bookstore. She confessed that when it had happened, by a stroke of fate the owners had saved them, and thanks to their proceeds they had escaped in time. Brianna realized that the Duke would probably not believe her words now, but Sir Ethan was also a sorcerer and could teach the child to control magic. The girl assured her that then the problems would finally be over. Duke Gerald got angry and asked the girl how she even knew about his abilities. The man was incredibly angry and asked Brianna who else she had blabbed to. Brianna assured him that she hadn't told anyone else, but the man was incredibly angry and worried about the gossip. The girl assured him there would be no such thing. Duke Gerald reminded Brianna that her job was to look after the son of imperial blood, not to protect outsiders. The man was angry at the girl for her foolish willfulness. Duke Gerald realized that she had now put the Stewart heir in danger. Brianna understood that it made no sense for the protagonists of the world to harm those around them. Duke Gerald said that the discussion was over and added that he would take care of himself. Brianna didn't want to leave and asked the Duke to let her explain. But the man interrupted the girl, said that she had really disappointed him, and added that from now on his son no longer needed a governess, nor did he need wizard mentors. Hearing this, the girl's feet left the ground from under her feet. He then ordered her to get out of his sight immediately. The Duke thought about the fact that what had happened was his oversight. If only he had not allowed it then, their secret would not have been revealed. Gerald could already imagine his son losing his temper and questioning why his daddy had done such a thing. The success scale above the man's head dropped from 8% to 5%. Gerald reflected on the fact that he wouldn't let anything like that happen, and he wouldn't let a single soul hurt his son. And then the scale dropped to 0. Duke Gerald noticed that Brianna was still here, and was angry that she had taken it upon herself to disobey. The girl wondered to the Duke if he really intended to keep the boys in the mansion until the end of time. Duke Gerald thought that his son should be the eagle that would soar to the heights and glorify the Stewart name. Brianna reminded him that he was only 5 years old, and he must not become a maimed chick, fuming in a cage. Before she left, she bluntly asked the Duke to really think about whether he was doing the right thing by him, then slammed the door behind her. Brianna suddenly felt really bad and thought about the fact that the system didn't lie, and once the success rate dropped to 0, her life would be over. The girl wondered why this was happening to her. After all, she had tried hard to change things, and in the end had failed. Brianna realized that being booted out of the Duke's estate was far worse than a death sentence. Brianna noticed that it was pouring rain, and the girl had the impression that even the heavens felt sorry for her. The girl realized that the end here was predetermined in advance, but she kept floundering to escape. But it was certain that she would remain imprisoned here forever. Brianna cried and tried to come to terms with the fact that time could not be turned back. Suddenly, lightning struck, and the girl thought that after her last words, the execution process had stopped, and as a result, she did not die. And it turns out, the scale hadn't hit bottom. Then Brianna decided that there was still a chance to correct the mistakes and direct the situation in the right direction. Brianna wiped her tears and decided that if she justified her own position, Gerald would definitely change his mind. As suddenly the girl sneezed and realized that it was too cold outside, and so she should go back to her room as soon as possible. Just as suddenly through the window, she saw that the young lord could not control his magic again. Brianna hurried to his room, wondering for what reason he suddenly lost control of his magic. The girl left for the manor as she suddenly ran into Duke Gerald. She realized from the look in his eyes that he was still angry. The man swung open the door to his son's room and noticed that he was indeed shrouded in magic and could not control it. The father wanted to run up to his son, but Brianna beat him to it and hugged him. The girl didn't understand what was going on and wondered why the situation seemed more dire compared to the past. Suddenly, Duke Gerald touched his son's forehead. The father asked his son not to be frightened, after which the boy began to fall asleep. The girl who was watching the whole picture realized that Gerald was absorbing the young lord's magic. Later, Brianna and the Duke were walking down the corridor. The girl wondered why he suddenly changed his stance. She remembered that after Gerald absorbed a surge of his son's magic, the boy fell into a deep sleep. Gerald beckoned the girl to follow him. Brianna remembered that the novel had never mentioned that the Duke possessed magic, and now wondered why on earth he had revealed his secret. The girl was afraid that she was being led somewhere to an execution without too many witnesses, but the man simply opened the doors and invited the girl to enter there. Brianna couldn't believe that the manor had such a creepy room, and it felt as if it had been abandoned for a long time. Brianna was afraid that she had actually been brought here to be killed. The girl was beginning to assume that her head would probably be chopped off with a sword, but she noticed that the man hadn't brought a blade with him. Then she began to think about being poisoned, but then she dismissed the thought, deciding that this method was used covertly from the eyes of others. Brianna began to suspect that he was using magic, for he was definitely skilled in it, but the Duke simply opened the curtain, causing the moonlight to illuminate the room. Brianna wondered why she had a feeling inside that Gerald was sad. The girl doubted that the almighty Duke had ever experienced such a feeling. The man told her that this was his old room. The Duke added that he was often locked in here. The man remembered his father turning to him and telling him that he would have to be here until he learned to control the spell. Duke Gerald had told Brianna that, like his son, he had been born with a curse in the form of sorcery. The outside world wouldn't accept an heir to the Stewart family who appeared to be a monster for any reason, so Papa locked him up in the castle. The Duke said that while he tried to curb magic, this den was his little universe. Brianna was saddened by the fact that there was no love around the Duke, no toys, and only half darkness kept him company. The girl realized that he was struggling with his own problems completely alone. Brianna asked the Duke why he was so determined to tell of the past, specifically the secret that was to remain behind all seals. The Duke muttered that it was indeed a good question. He remembered that the girl had acted just like she had during the incident in the bookstore. Despite the fact that she is usually a tutor, she had rushed to Demarest's aid without thinking of the possible danger. In addition, her words back then about letting him let her work for him as a governess from now on, because the boy really needed love and care, instilled confidence in him. Duke Gerald assumed that if he overstepped his bounds and agreed for the first time, the situation would surely change. Therefore, he said that regarding what had happened earlier, he apologized to Brianna and suggested that he try to find a good wizard mentor for him. Just as suddenly, the success rate over Duke's head increased to 20%. Brianna wanted to see if she really hadn't overheard, and Jairus had truly apologized. Brianna explained that it was very tactless of her to seek out a tutor on her own. The girl assured that she was just trying to do her best for the young master's benefit. Duke Gerald interrupted the girl, saying that they would do as she wished. Sophia and Ethan looked into Duke Gerald's eyes and realized that it was the true look of an assassin. The powerful mage wondered if he had really come here to teach magic, or if it was more of an interrogation. Just as suddenly, the tension passed immediately as Brianna entered the room along with the young master. Brianna looked at the situation and realized that this was quite the expected outcome. The girl thought about the fact that even though Duke Gerald had agreed to find a wizard mentor for his son, he had agreed to tutor him alone and, in short, had taken a defensive stance for his son. Brianna explained that then the others would be aware of his abilities. She too thought that this option was the safest. At first, the girl thought the idea wasn't a bad one. However, now she noticed that the atmosphere was much more tense than ever. Therefore, she decided that she needed to defuse the situation as soon as possible. Brianna reminded her that it was already safe to start. The girl leaned over to the child to see if he was in anticipation. The girl glanced over to the Duke, to which he responded in the affirmative. Brianna was incredibly excited because the lesson would finally begin. Demaris looked at Sophia and Ethan and remembered that the girl and the boy were from the festival. The boy told them that he was very excited about their gift, and also thanked them. The young gentleman promised to try harder. Ethan suggested that on such an occasion they should begin. As suddenly Duke Gerald coughed and said that he forgot to warn Sir Ethan that he was now his apprentice, Sophia began to conjure. Demaris watched it with interest, after which the girl asked the child if it looked like a magic trick. The boy was mesmerized by the sorcery and said it was absolutely incredible. Brianna, watching Sophia and the young wizard, was incredibly pleased that they were getting along quickly. But here were those two at least already discussing the details. Ethan warned that he was about to demonstrate how to control the energy and asked the young master to repeat after him. Ethan became angry when he realized the Duke was watching inattentively. Brianna joined them and remarked that it really did look incredible. Duke Gerald then showed off his magic. Brianna realized that his grace was not inferior. Then Ethan's sorcery became much more active as well. Ethan wanted to see if the Duke could surpass such a thing. Then Duke Gerald conjured a huge fish. Sophia found it amazing that Duke Gerald would grab it on the fly on the first try. Ethan noticed that it wasn't at all rookie level, and on top of that, if the Duke had been trained by a mage, there would have been gossip. But there had never been any. Therefore, the man assumed that in all likelihood, he had been given such a gift from above. After a while, Sophia and Ethan were leaving the manor. The girl patted the young master on the head, saying that he had done a good job today. Demaris asked Sophia if they would come back here again, to which the girl answered in the affirmative and waved and got into the carriage. Brianna was incredibly pleased with her success.